Good afternoon. Our lecture for this afternoon would be on gene regulation. Learning goals for this lecture would be the following: DNA elements that control transcription, protein factors that control transcription, a closer look on the lac operon as a model for regulation, and regulation of protein synthesis by RNA. There are different ways to regulate protein concentration in a cell. So one is synthesis of primary RNA transcript, how to process this RNA into messenger RNA, post-transcriptional modifications of mRNA, degradation of mRNA, protein synthesis, post-translational modification of protein, targeting and transport of the protein, and degradation of the protein. There are 7 processes that affect the steady state concentration of a protein. These are mainly transcription initiation, post-transcriptional processing, RNA stability, translational regulation, protein modification, protein transport, and protein degradation. So to understand gene regulation, in the past, focus has been on understanding transcription initiation. But there is increasing elucidation of post-transcriptional and translational regulation recently. Mechanisms can be elaborate and interdependent, especially in development, such that regulation relies on precise protein DNA and protein-protein contacts. Basic vocabulary of gene regulation. So there's a housekeeping gene. So this is under constitutive expression. This is constantly expressed in approximately all cells. And a regulated gene. So these would be the levels of the gene product which rises and falls with the needs of the organism. If we go back to our enzyme lecture, this would be feedback mechanism of the cell. So some genes are inducible, which turns on a mechanism. And some genes are also repressible, which turns off its actions. So RNA polymerase binding to promoters is a major target of regulation. So RNA polymerases bind to promoter sequences near the starting point of transcription initiation. The RNA pol-promoter interaction greatly influences the rate of transcription initiation. Regulatory proteins work to enhance or inhibit this interaction between RNA pol and the promoter DNA. So a consensus sequence is found in many E. coli promoters. So most bacterial promoters include the conserved 10 and 35 regions that interact with the sigma factor of your RNA polymerase. So substitutions in this 10-35 region would usually reduce the affinity of RNA pol for the promoter. Some promoters are also included, the upstream element that interacts with the alpha subunit of your RNA polymerase. So this is the 10 region, 35 region, and this is your upstream element. The use of your sigma factors, we recognize different classes of promoters, and it allows coordinated expression of different sets of genes. So binding other proteins to promoters would help in rising promoters of specific genes, the binding of small signaling molecules. It undergoes post-translational modifications. Protein's affinity toward DNA is altered by ligand binding or post-translational modifications, and allows expression of specific genes in response to signals in the environment. Regulation by specificity factors such as your sigma subunits of your RNA pol are affected by specificity factors that alter your RNA polymerase affinity for certain promoters. Examples of which would be the alpha subunit of your E. coli RNA pol. So most E. coli promoters are recognized by sigma 70. So this subunit can be replaced by one of 6 additional specificity factors. More specifically, heat shock replaces sigma 70 with sigma 32 and direct RNA pol to different promoters because of changes of heat. So this heat occurs when bacteria subjected to heat stress. This change would be from sigma 70 to 32 and causes your RNA pol to bind to different set of promoters. The transcription of new products includes chaperones that keep proteins in correct conformation even in heat. So small molecule effectors can regulate activators and repressors. These repressors reduce RNA pol promoter interactions. So these are repressors that reduce RNA pol promoter interactions or block the polymerase. This binds to operator sequences on your DNA and is usually near a promoter in bacteria but further away in many eukaryotes. Effectors can bind to repressor and induce a conformational change. These changes may increase or decrease repressor's affinity for the operator and thus may increase or decrease transcription. So there are activators that improve contacts between RNA polymerase and the promoter. Binding sites in DNA for activators are called enhancers. So in bacteria, enhancers are usually adjacent to the promoter and often adjacent to promoters that are weak, bind RNA polymerase weakly, so the activator is necessary. Think of it as a support of a weak enhancer so that it could produce a synergistic effect, thereby contributing to the reaction. In eukaryotes, enhancers may be very distant from the promoter. So there is negative regulation involving repressors. an example of which would be a repressor binds to your DNA and shuts down transcription. An alternative signal causes your repressor to dissociate from your DNA transcription, which is induced. So for example, the two examples on your slides would show opposite effects on transcription, but both represent negative regulation. So the first one, the molecular signal causes dissociation of repressor from the DNA, thereby inducing transcription. Okay? On the other hand, molecular signal causes binding of repressor to your DNA, thereby inhibiting transcription, thereby turning your signal off. So even if they have different results, both would be considered negative regulation. It's the same way with positive regulation. Your positive regulation would involve activators. And this enhances activity of your RNA polymerase. So your activator binding sites are the near promoters that weakly bind to your RNA pol or do not bind at all. So it may remain bound until a molecule signals dissociation. Alternatively, the activator may only bind when signaled. So this positive regulation molecular signal causes dissociation of activator from your DNA, inhibiting transcription. So the signal dissociates the activator, thereby turning your molecule or your operon off. For positive regulation, your molecular signal causes binding of your activator to your DNA. Here is your activator, thereby turning the operon on. In my previous slides, we've mentioned DNA looping. So even if you are far away through loops, which makes it nearer, for example, for coiling, for forming DNA loops, so activators can influence transcription at promoters thousands of proteins away. So looping can be facilitated by architectural regulatory proteins, and your coactivators may mediate binding by binding to both activator and RNA polymerase. So many bacterial genes are transcribed and regulated together in an operon. So this is an operon, a cluster of genes sharing a promoter and regulatory sequences. So genes are transcribed together, so mRNAs are several genes represented on one mRNA. So this example is your LAC operon. So your operon would consist of activator binding site, a repressor binding site. So these are the genes transcribed as a unit, your operator, your promoter, and your regulatory sequences. So the LAC operon has been the model operon for many years. So it's a work of Jacob and Monod and shows how three genes for metabolism of lactose are regulated together as an operon. First is your LAC-Z, that's your beta-galactosidase. This cleaves lactose to yield glucose and galactose. Your next is your LAC-Y, that's your lactose protease. It transports lactose into a cell. And your LAC-A, which is your thiogalactoside transacetylase. So this would rely on negative regulation via a repressor gene. So lactose metabolism in E. coli. So when glucose is abundant and lactose is lacking, cells make only very low levels of enzymes for lactose metabolism. Thereby, transcription is repressed. So if glucose is scarce and cells are fed lactose, the cells can use it as their energy source. The cells suddenly express the genes for the enzymes for lactose metabolism, thereby transcription is no longer repressed. So, two conditions, glucose is abundant, lactose would be scarce. If glucose is scarce, lactose could be activated and be an alternative energy source. So this is what lactose metabolism in E. coli. So remember your galactoside permease, beta-galactosidase in your chain. So a gene called LAC-I encodes a repressor called the LAC repressor. So it has its own promoter, PI. Transcription of the repressor is independent of transcription of the enzymes the repressor regulates. This repressor can then bind to three operator sites, O1 to O3, but it binds primarily to the operator O1. O1 is adjacent to your promoter, and binding of the repressor helps prevent RNA polymerase from binding to the promoter. It also finds two secondary operators with the DNA loop between this secondary operator and O1. It reduces transcription, but transcription occurs at a low basal rate even with the repressor bound. Okay. So again, this is the LAC-I. This is your promoter. This is your promoter initiator. This is your 3' and your 5' end. These are your three operators, O1, which is the initial binding site, and your O2 and your O3. This is your LAC-Z, your LAC-Y, and your LAC-A. Okay? So, when it has bind to O1, it forms a loop, and then it either binds to your O2 or your O3. In this case, it binds to your O3 and it makes it nearer by forming a loop. Thereby, the repressor bound to O1 and O3 with DNA looped between. So this lac operon is induced by your alleolactose. Alleolactose is an inducer that binds to your repressor and causes it to dissociate from the operator. So beta-galactosidase does not only hydrolyze lactose, but it can also isomerize lactose into alleolactose, such that its relationship would be directly proportional to each other. So the lac repressor gene is a tetramer. So each dimer binds to the palindromic operator sequence, and the O1 sequence reflects the symmetry of the repressor. And there are approximately 20 repressors per cell. So it's governed by more than repressor binding. So remember, your glucose is not the only source of energy in our biochemistry cycle. Remember that we also have our cyclic AMP aside from your glucose. So when your glucose is present, lactose genes are turned off. It's mediated by your cyclic AMP and your receptor proteins, so that for catabolite activator proteins. Okay. So what is cyclic AMP? It binds near the promoter, stimulates transcription 50-fold. It could bend your DNA. An open complex doesn't form readily without your CRP, CAMP. So it only has this effect when the lac repressor has dissociated. Cyclic AMP is made when glucose is low, such that when glucose is high or low, if lactose is absent, the repressor stays bound regardless. So no transcription even when CRP and your CAMP bind. Glucose high, but CAMP is low, lactose is absent. No transcription. Glucose low, CAMP is high, lactose is still absent, thereby no gene expression still. So what makes your lac operon turn on? So when your repressor dissociates eventually, but transcription is only stimulated significantly if cyclic AMP rises. So your glucose high and your cyclic AMP is still low, lactose is present, there would be gene expression but at a low level. Of course, when you have your CAMP high, you know that it is a promoter and lactose is present, there would be a high level of gene expression. Okay. So the two requirements for the strongest induction of your lac operon would be one, lactose must be present to form alleolactose to bind to the repressor and cause it to dissociate from the operator. This reduces repression. And the glucose must be severely low so that your cyclic AMP can increase, bind to CRP, form that complex near the promoter, and cause activation. So combined effects of your glucose and lactose on the lac operon, lactose is low, repressor is bound, inhibited. Lactose is high, repressor dissociates, permitted transcription. When glucose is high, CRP is not bound, transcription is dampened, and glucose is low, CAMP is high, CRP is bound, activation of your gene expression. So binding of proteins to DNA also involves hydrogen bonding. So your glutamine and asparagine can form a specific hydrogen bond with your adenines N6 and H7 hydrogens. Arginine can also form specific hydrogen bonds with the cytosine guanine base pair. The major groove is the right size for the alpha helix and has exposed H bonding groups. So this is your glutamine or asparagine binding to your adenine and your arginine binding to your cytosine guanine. So we have different protein binding motifs. So these are protein arrangements used in thousands of different regulatory proteins and are hence called motifs. So used in your lac repressor would be the helix turn helix. Other examples would be the zinc finger and the leucine zipper. So your helix turn helix motif is common in DNA binding proteins. This is approximately 20 amino acids and one alpha helix for recognition for DNA, and then the beta turn, then another alpha helix. So the sequence-specific binding due to specific contacts between the recognition helix and the major groove, you will see in the later slide. For DNA binding helix turn helix motifs are found in your lac repressor. So the red one would be your alpha helix, then your beta turn would be your blue, and then again another alpha helix. The zinc finger motif is common in eukaryotic transcription factors. This would be at approximately 30 amino acids. The finger portion is a peptide loop cross-linked by the zinc ion. This is usually coordinated by 4-cysteine or 2-cysteine and 2-histidine. So these interact with your DNA or RNA such that binding is weak, so several zinc fingers often act in tandem. So this binding can range from sequence specific to random. So this is your zinc fingers, of course, with your zinc as your star. The leucine zipper motif is a dimer of two ambipathic alpha helices plus a DNA binding domain. So each helix is hydrophobic on one side and hydrophilic on the other. The hydrophobic side is the contact between the two monomers. So every seventh residue in helices is leucine. Helices form a coiled coil and the DNA binding domain has basic residues such as lysine and arginine to interact with the polyanionic DNA. So this is the structure of a leucine zipper of yeast. So in yeast, there are only 300 transcription factors for thousands of genes. So the transcription factors mix and match, and there are different combinations which regulate different genes. So your eukaryotic gene regulation relies on protein-protein interactions. So your eukaryotic RNA binding domain could be called your RNA recognition motifs. So these are usually 90 to 100 amino acids and have 4 strands anti-parallel beta sheets with 2 alpha helices. Found in gene activators and bind to both DNA and RNA. So DNA binds and induces the transcription and binds to your RNAs, forces the proteins to compete with DNA for binding, thus decreasing gene transcription. They may bind to mRNA and other ncRNAs. So this motif may be part of your DNA binding regulatory proteins or may occur in proteins binding only RNA. So this is an example of your RNM domain. So amino acid biosynthesis regulated by transcriptional attenuation. So bacterial operons are also found for biosynthetic pathways. The TRP operon is regulated by transcription attenuation. Transcription begins but is then halted by a stop signal attenuator. It relies on the fact that in bacteria, transcription and translation can proceed simultaneously. The attenuator sequence is in the 5' region of a leader sequence and it can make the ribosome stall. The role of the attenuator, which is part of the leader, determines if transcription will be attenuated at the end of the leader or if transcription will continue into the genes for tryptophan synthesis. So our second model will be the TRP operon. So your TRP repressor, so your TRP operon would bind to your regulator protein and your attenuator would be found downstream. So your leader would be your TRPL. So what happens? The leader is 162 nucleotides long. So it has segments 1 to 4. If segments 3 and 4 base pair, they form a hairpin structure and that is the attenuation signal. If segments 2 and 3 base pair, the transcription proceeds and the tryptophan synthetic enzymes are made and there is no attenuation. Thereby, tryptophan is produced. So how then would they know if we could form 2 and 3 or form 3 and 4? So there are 4 segments as mentioned, leader, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what happens is that this is the hairpin of your 2 and 3 pair and your 3 and 4 pair. Okay. So what happens is segment 1, of course, is transcribed immediately. So the ribosome is closed behind RNA pol and segment 1 contains important tryptophan codons. If tryptophan is abundant, translation proceeds such that segment 2 is covered with the ribosome and can't pair with segment 4. So what will happen naturally, your segment pairs with 4 and your gene expression is attenuated. If it's scarce, the ribosome will stall at the TRP codons and allows your 2 and 3 pairs to form. Translation would then proceed. So your other amino acid synthesis operons also use this regulation mechanism, such as leucine, histidine, and phenylalanine. Okay. So this is what we've mentioned. When TRP synthesis is not needed, your tryptophan is high, what will happen? Your 3 and 4 would form because segment 1 would produce more ribosomes, thereby inhibiting pairing with your sequence 2. When it's low and TRP synthesis is needed, you will form your 2 and 3 structure. A repressor protein also regulates your TRP transcription. So your TRP operon also has a repressor that binds to DNA in the presence of tryptophan. So the TRP repressor is a homodimer. So if it's abundant, it binds to your repressor and causes it to bind to the operator and slows expression of genes for TRP synthesis. It has helix-turn helix motifs that interact with DNA via the major groove. Your SOS response is response to extensive DNA damage. This results in a cell cycle arrest and activation of DNA repair systems. So normally, SOS genes are repressed by the LEX-A repressor, and this LEX-A binds to operators at several genes. So damaged DNA would produce a lot of single strands. So this single strand DNA is bound by the protein REC-A, or in eukaryotes RAD51. So this activates REC-A's ability to interact with your LEX-A repressor. So REC-A binds to LEX-A repressor, causing it to self-cleave and dissociate from your DNA. So this is the regulation of the SOS response in E. coli. So damage to DNA would produce your single strand gap. So your REC-A binds to that single stranded DNA, and then your LEC-A repressor is inactivated. Some repressors keep viruses in a dormant state within the bacterial host. So REC-A or RAD51 can help cleave and inactivate those other repressors. And this then would allow virus to replicate, lyse cell, and release new virus particles. So when bacteria need more protein, they make more ribosomes. So ribosome synthesis consumes energy and resources, so it is highly regulated. So ribosomal protein, your R protein, are regulated via translational feedback. So each operon for an R protein encodes a translational repressor. So repressor binds to your mRNA and blocks translation. Your repressor has greater affinity for rRNA than for mRNA, so translation is suppressed only when synthesis of R proteins exceeds a level needed to make ribosomes. So this is an example of your translation feedback in ribosomal protein operons. So the stringent response occurs when amino acid concentrations are low. So lack of amino acid produces uncharged transcriptional RNA, and this uncharged transcriptional RNA binds to your ribosomal A site, which then triggers a cascade that begins with binding stringent factor protein to ribosome. This stringent factor catalyzes formation of nucleotide guanosine tetraphosphate. It is formed from adding diphosphate to your 3' end of your GTP. Then a phosphorylase cleaves a phosphate to yield your guanosine tetraphosphate. So binding of your guanosine tetraphosphate to your RNA polymerase reduces rRNA synthesis. So this is your diagram for your stringent response in your E. coli. Some RNAs participate in regulation. This is your cis regulation affecting its own function and trans regulation affecting another molecule. Example of which is an mRNA of gene of your R polymerase sigma factor that encodes sigma S, a specificity factor used by E. coli in stress conditions, such as starvation when sigma S needed to transcribe stress response genes. Sigma S mRNA is present at low levels but is not translated due to a hairpin structure that inhibits its binding to ribosomes. So your small RNAs bind to this mRNA and inhibit formation of the hairpin. So your sRNA and mRNA interactions are facilitated by a chaperone protein called HFQ. So this is your regulation of bacterial mRNA function in trans by sRNA. So the ribosome binding Shine-Dalgarno sequence is sequestered into a stem loop structure in the mRNA. In the presence of your protein HFQ, small regulatory RNA DSRA binds to your mRNA. The binding of DSRA opens up the stem loop and allows mRNA binding to the ribosome. The sRNA would then promote translation. So inhibition, on the other hand, in the presence of your protein HFQ, small regulatory RNA OxyS binds to your mRNA. The binding of your OxyS blocks the ribosome binding site in mRNA. OxyS RNA then inhibits translation. So this is cis regulation by riboswitches. So a riboswitch is domain of an mRNA that can bind a small molecule ligand. The binding of ligand affects conformation of the mRNA and its activity. Thus, riboswitches allow mRNA to participate in their own regulation and respond to changing concentrations of the ligand. So riboswitches have been found to respond to many coenzymes, metabolites, and so on. They are also found in eukaryotic introns and seem to regulate splicing. Some riboswitches are unique to bacteria and therefore a target for antibiotics. So how could we use this in our medical life? So regulation by gene recombination, gene therapy. So these are processes which can remove promoters relative to the coding sequence or can put genes into multiple orientations to alter the expression. So example would be flagellin genes in your salmonella. So in one orientation, your flagellin genes is expressed with a repressor for FLGC gene. In another orientation, only FLJC is expressed. The process is called phase variation. So, regulation of flagellin genes. So, this would affect the flagella in your salmonella. Again, you have your protein repressor, FLJB, or in your FLJA. So, promoter for your FLIC, and then your FLIC as when it is not activated. Okay. So these are examples of gene regulation by recombination. Okay. So as mentioned, phase variation. So alternative expression of two flagellin genes allows evasion of host immune response. For your host range, alternative expression of two sets of tail fiber genes affects host range, and so on and so forth. So these are just examples. In eukaryotic gene regulation, access of your eukaryotic promoters to RNA polymerase is hindered by your chromatin structure. So this would require remodeling chromatin. Positive regulation mechanisms predominate and are required for even a basal level of gene expression. So eukaryotic gene expression requires a complicated set of proteins. So there are three features of transcriptionally active chromatin. So euchromatin is less condensed chromatin distinguished from transcriptionally inactive heterochromatin, and chromatin remodeling of transcriptionally active genes, reposition of nucleosomes, histone variants, and covalent modifications to nucleosomes. So nucleosomes can be restructured by specific protein complexes. This would be your switch sucrose non-fermentable complex. These are remodels chromatin to irregularly spaced nucleosomes. This stimulates binding of your transcription factors and works with proteins of ISWI family. These are ATP-dependent alteration of spacing between nucleosomes. So eukaryotic cells generally have 9 to 10 different chromodomain helicase DNA binding grouped into 3 subfamilies. Each family has a specialized role. For example, your INO80 family, these are roles in remodeling chromatin and DNA repair. SWR1 promotes subunit exchange in nucleosomes inducing histone variants. So your modification of histones could be done by the following: methylation, phosphorylation, acetylation, ubiquitination, sumylation, and occur mostly in your N-terminal domain of the histones found near the exterior of the nucleosome particle. So this alters transcription. Covalent modification of histones allows recruitment of enzymes and transcription factors. For methylation of your lysine 4 and lysine 36 at histone 3 and arginine of H3 and H4, so this would result in transcriptional activation. This recruits histone acetyltransferases that then acetylate a particular lysine. So reversed by histone deacetylase that makes chromatin inactive. So acetylation of your lysine results in decreased affinity of histone for DNA. So these are some enzyme complexes that catalyze chromatin structural changes associated with transcription. So some speculate that genomes encode directions for nucleosome organization. Nucleosomes seem to occur at specific sequences. Covalent modifications seem to occur at specific regions and sequences. A nucleosome positioning code or histone modification code explains these observations. Positive regulation of your eukaryotic promoters. Eukaryotic gene transcription is usually dependent on activator proteins and not your RNA pol affinity. So most promoters are inaccessible, thus making repressors redundant, and combinatorial control provides a more precise positive control for gene regulation. Negative regulation exists but typically involves INCRNAs, not proteins. So transcription activators or your enhancers are proteins that bind to upstream activator sequences, architectural regulators to facilitate DNA looping, chromatin modification, remodeling proteins, and co-activators. They act indirectly and have basal transcription factors. These can bind thousands of nucleotides away from the data box of the promoter and can have DNA binding, protein binding, and or signal molecule binding domains. Some regulate a few genes and some regulate many hundreds of genes. So looping of DNA, as mentioned previously, allows distant enhancers to modulate assembly at promoters. So a high mobility group of proteins have multiple functions, including architectural regulation. So your mediator complex binds to carboxyl terminal domain of RNA polymerase II, and these would be required for both basal and regulated transcription at many promoters. This later provides assembly surface for other complexes. Your tata-binding protein is first component of your pre-initiation complex at the typical tata box of a promoter. So your binding of activators triggers many promoters to bind RNA polymerase II. Binding one activator seems to enable binding of additional activators. Often, components bind in a regular order, and histones are displaced as activators bind. The process coordinates with chromatin remodeling. So for yeast galactose metabolism, the regulation of genes for importing and metabolizing galactose in yeast illustrates important principles. Genes for galactose metabolism are spread over several chromosomes, but all have similar promoters. Your Tata box, your sequences, and upstream activator sequence recognized by your GAL4 protein. So all GAL genes are regulated by a common set of proteins. So galactose binds GAL3P, then forms a complex with GAL4P and GAL-ATP. It allows GAL4P to be the activator. GAL4 also recruits the SWI and NSF and mediator complexes for opening the chromatin. So these would be examples of your genes of galactose metabolism in yeast. So features of your hormone mediated regulation. So your hormone receptor complex binds to DNA regions. These are called your hormone response elements. So hormone receptors have a DNA binding domain with zinc fingers, and hormone receptors also have a ligand binding region at the C terminus that is highly variable between different receptors. So there are two types, monomeric type 1 receptors for sex hormones and glucocorticoids, found in cytoplasm in complex with HSP70. When your hormone binds, HSP70 dissociates and your receptor dimerizes and exposes nuclear localization region. So your hormone receptor complex travels to nucleus to be a transcriptional activator. Your type 2, examples of which would be your thyroid hormone receptor, is found in nucleus bound to DNA and co-repressor retinoid X repressor. Your hormone binds, then your co-repressor dissociates. So your receptor hormone complex then activates your transcription. Secondary messengers lead to activation of your transcription pathways. So for example, your beta-adrenergic pathway, your cyclic AMP, activates your protein kinase A. It then enters the nucleus and phosphorylates cyclic AMP response element binding protein. CREB is a transcription activator of genes leading to fuel use rather than fuel storage. So these are the four mechanisms of translation regulation: phosphorylation of translation initiation factors, translational repressors typically binds to your 3' disruption of your L4E and your L4G interactions, RNA-mediated regulation or gene silencing. So microRNAs silence genes by binding to your mRNAs. This can prevent transcription of the mRNA by cleaving it or by blocking it. Some microRNAs are made briefly during development. They are called small temporal RNAs. So any dsRNA that corresponds to an mRNA and is introduced into a cell will be cleaved by dicer into short segments called small interfering RNAs. This will then bind to your mRNA to silence its translation. This process is called RNA interference. So this is your RNA interference visually. So referred to as your INCRNAs when longer than 200. Example would be HSR1 to LNCRNA interacts with your EF1A to regulate translation in stress cells. So our knowledge of RNCRNAs is rapidly expanding as further research continues to explore this field. So your embryonic development requires complex and intricate coordination and regulation of gene expression. So more genes are expressed during early development than any other part of the life cycle in a differentiated tissue. Examples, say urchin, oocytes, would have vastly different mRNAs. So polarity must be established, anterior versus posterior and dorsal versus ventral. The embryo body may have repeating segments with characteristic features. Morphogens, proteins that cause surrounding tissues to change shape, affect development, and genes from both mother and embryo affect development and proper segmentation. So homeotic genes specify development of organs and appendages in a particular body segment. Hox genes contain a conserved sequence present in all of these genes. Maternal genes are genes expressed in nurse and follicle cells that affect initial polarity and axis development. So bicoid is a transcription factor that activates expression of several segmentation genes, translational repressor that inactivated certain mRNAs deposit at the anterior pole. The lack of bicoid results in an embryo without a head or thorax and two abdomens. Nanos is a translational repressor protein deposited at the posterior of the egg. So, translational regulation of anterior-posterior development. So, this is in Drosophila. So, other found in clusters and are highly conserved amount in animals. So, development potential of stem cells. So, this had the potential to differentiate into various tissues. Totipotent cells have the ability to differentiate into any tissue type or even a complete organism. And that is what stem cell treatment aims to do eventually. Pluripotent cells are able to differentiate into any of the three germ cell layers and many types of tissues, but they cannot make a complete organism. Unipotent cells can differentiate into only one type of cell or tissue. So embryonic stem cells are pluripotent cells of the blastocyst. So these are used in embryonic stem cell research. Adult stem cells are limited potential compared with embryonic. So these are your hematopoietic stem cells which can give rise to different cells in a niche or microenvironment. Considered multipotent. So your bone marrow hematopoietic stem cells give rise to many types of blood cells and those that can regenerate bone but not liver, kidney, and so on. So this is the development potential of your stem cells. Sperm oocyte, so you're up to the morula, it's totipotent and your blastocyst. Once it um, goes further than your blastocyst, it becomes pluripotent and then further subdivides into your circulatory, nervous, and immune system. And that's where the research stays and in research as so far as stem cell research is going. So in summary, we learned that positive and negative gene regulation occurs in both prokaryotic and eukaryotic organisms. There are many useful examples of gene regulation. So know the LAC operon, know the TRP operon. Regulatory proteins contain domains that interact with your DNA, RNA, small molecules, and so on. Your ncRNAs are involved in regulation of gene expression. Eukaryotic gene regulation is complex and involves chromatin remodeling, combinatory control, intercellular and intracellular signals, and gene silencing. Development in animals is controlled by cascades of regulatory proteins and their precise position within the embryo. Thank you for listening to my lecture. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel for more lectures on biochemistry. Thank you.